Planet Dolan.
From making artists sound more romantic to changing pretty much everything about World War II, we look at 9 shocking attempts people made to rewrite history.
How's it going? I'm Danger Dolan. I'm here to decipher some random things I found on the internet the other day that I think you might be interested in.
Number 9.
Put away all that talk about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. See, what actually happened is that China were the ones to stop Imperial Japan from taking over the Pacific. Or at least that's what was recently said by President Xi Jinping at a military parade celebrating the victory over the Japanese. While 15 million Chinese died during Japan's invasion that lasted 14 years, the rest of the world would agree that nuclear bombs played more of a role in ending the war. Many have seen this as an attempt to rewrite history in order to foster more nationalism in China. It's not like a Google search can prove their president wrong. Oh wait,
Number 8.
you've likely heard a little romantic story about how Vincent Van Gogh was so crazy in love with a woman that he cut his ear off for her. Yeah, that one's pure bullshit. Van Gogh more probably cut his ear off and gave it to a prostitute because he was drunk, not romantic. One can hope that it wasn't in a form of payment, although it's also possible that Van Gogh didn't cut the ear off himself either, losing it in a duel with a fellow painter. Either someone tried to rewrite history to make Van Gogh seem like a crazy romantic rather than just an artist who is crazy.
Number 7.
Remember how silly people were in the past when they went to a mass panic over a radio broadcast of War of the Worlds? Man, that sure made old-timey people sound stupid. So it's lucky for them that it never goddamn happened. Newspapers reported the mass hysteria, but independent fact-checking at the time showed that small audience who tuned in knew it was a real alien invasion. This would be because the station played disclaimers before every ad break and, well, because people were just kinda dumb. Newspapers only played up the whole thing so that they could bag out their new competition, the radio.
Number 6.
How could the Nazis commit such terrible crimes against humanity? Well, that's easy. They were evil because they were all raging homosexuals? So says the 100% historically based book The Pink Swastika, that can basically be summarized as Hitler was totally gay, guys. I can't prove it at all, but that means all homosexuals are bad. This book also tries to explain away the Nazi party murdering homosexuals by basically saying they only killed feminine men. Alright, so Hitler was some kind of masculine power top that had just had it out for twinks and cross-dressers. We'll explain away bigotry with even more bigotry.
Number 5.
If you lived in the Soviet Union during the Cold War, then history was less history and more shit made up to make communism look better. The official history of Russia started being meddled with as early as 1918, but really started to get messed up after World War II. Corrupting history to paint a different picture every day of the week served the important purpose of allowing the government to justify anything they did. Most notably, the party wanted to hide things like the Great Purge, where the secret police went around torturing people for anti-Soviet activity, because stuff like that really gets people down about your leadership.
Number 4.
From one censor-happy regime to another, North Korea is still actively rewriting history all the time, especially when it comes to the Korean War, because people will hate South Korea more if you play the victim. Basically, their version of events pins the whole war on the United States and South Koreans because they were evil, and Kim Jong-un is the sexiest person in the universe. They even go as far as to pin every major atrocity of the war on the US military, including a massacre where US soldiers used samurai swords to behead North Koreans. Because samurai swords were used frequently by the US Army. Don't you know anything about history?
Number 3.
Japan also had its long history of not being able to deal with what they did in World War II, being spurred on by strong right-wing groups. The debate over what Japan was responsible for has been raging since the war ended. Most notable is the denial of the Nanking massacre, where anywhere from 50,000 to 300,000 Chinese were killed. Some saying that the Chinese did this to themselves to make Japan look bad. These groups have also called for school textbooks to omit the atrocities committed during this time, over fears that it would cause shame over people's ancestors.
Number 2.
You might have seen some conspiracy nuts posting about this one recently, primarily stating that the Egyptians were actually black-skinned Africans. This is an argument used by Afrocentrists to show how white people have been lying about history, using the rationalization that Egypt is in Africa, so they must have been black. Unfortunately for them, science and history tell a different story. Genetic profiling has shown that ancient Egypt pretty much looked the same as modern Egypt. Skin color-wise, the country actually varied from dark brown to light brown, depending on how far north of the Nile you lived. Most of the arguments for this have about as much credibility as saying Hitler was gay.
Number 1.
Speaking of Hitler, did you know that he actually saved Europe on the onslaught of Stalin's communist empire? That's how some historical revisionists have decided that Hitler actually did Europe a favor by invading Russia, while also simultaneously taking over Europe for himself. You could probably see the small logical flaw there. The argument goes that the Nazis found a large amount of military infrastructure around Russia's border, suggesting that the Soviets were planning to invade Europe themselves, and Hitler decided to strike, saving Europe from a communist invasion. How dare Stalin try to take over while Hitler was taking over? That's just rude. Speaking of history, if you guys could change any single event in the history of the world, what would it be and why? Let us know on the Reddit page linked below, and you might be featured in a future countdown.
That's it for this countdown. And have a good one!
In China, you better not be planning on getting reincarnated without supplying the proper paperwork. This ban was an attempt to pull rank on those rebel Tibetan monks and force them to recognize the Chinese government as the boss of them.